Welcome everyone to Inside the Scholar's Journey. I'm Pat Nana-Sinkam. I'm a professor in pulmonary and critical care medicine, associate director of the Wright Center for Clinical and Translational Science at Virginia Commonwealth University. Here at the Wright Center, one of our primary objectives is to support our basic and clinical scientists in translating discovery to improving health in our communities. And my co-host, Dr. Neigh, and I lead our K-12 program, which is focused primarily on early career faculty.
I'm Gretchen Neigh. I'm a professor and vice chair of neuroscience and anatomy here at VCU in the School of Medicine. And as Pat mentioned, I help to direct the K-12 program. And here at the Wright Center, we often talk about the journey of a researcher, but today we're diving into a part of that journey that many early career scholars and even more advanced scholars like myself find a little more daunting. So we're trying to understand how we can better communicate with the general public about what we do and why that's important. And we have a very special guest today. Sara Serritella is here to help us in this part of our journey. She's the Director of Communications at the Institute of Translational Medicine, one of our sister NIH-funded CTSA programs that's based in Chicago. There, she orchestrates strategic messaging that reaches millions of people, and she's leading high-profile initiatives like the New Normal and the NIH-recognized Save the Humans campaign. She's a lecturer at the University of Chicago, where she co-built the first 4-credit science communication curriculum at the Pritzker School of Medicine. And she's here today to help us understand why, in her own words, your work can't live on if it isn't advocated, communicated, and applied. So Sara, welcome to Inside the Scholar's Journey.
Thank you so much. We're really excited to be here and give all of your folks some concrete tools to get their work out there.
So Sara, thank you so much for being here. Why don't we just jump right in? So we know how important it is to communicate our impact. The younger generation, actually, they're fully bought in, right? But as a necessity of scientific training, we're taught to focus on nuance and precision. And that's where it becomes a little bit difficult. I've heard people say, well, resumes are a relic. You got to have to pass the Google test. However, for a scholar who's already convinced that they need a digital presence, but they feel stuck, what are some practical first steps to translate that conviction, that deep conviction for the science that they do and they're pursuing, into a digital footprint that doesn't importantly sacrifice the scientific integrity?
Such a great question. And number one, scientific integrity and accuracy have to be at the forefront. Great science communication distills. It does not dumb down. It does not sacrifice accuracy. And some really low lift, high reward ways people can get that digital footprint going. Number one, be active on LinkedIn. And when I say active, sometimes people think that's, oh my gosh, there are influencers, people posting 3 times a day. No. LinkedIn, if you post 1 time a week, you are in the top 1 to 2% of LinkedIn posters in the world. So there's a huge opportunity. And search engine optimization, when we talk about the Google gut check, really pulls in LinkedIn results. So if you are posting on LinkedIn, you don't have to go build a separate website, although there are lots of free, easy tools where you could do that and display your work. So you have the opportunity to, in just a few minutes, document and share what you're already doing instead of creating something crazy and fancy, as opposed to, building some complex, fancy production. You still get huge value out of those few moments of sharing.
Thinking about that LinkedIn post, that maybe after this, that's the first thing I should go and do.
Yes!
I have LinkedIn, but it's probably been a couple months since I did anything on there. So much of what we do as scientists is generating building blocks, right? So really small pieces of what becomes a really large picture. So if in your work, and much of my work is basic science, if I'm making a brick, essentially, that maybe someday will go into a huge, beautiful building, how do I get people excited about the brick without overstating the significance of it?
Great question. I love the brick, and the bricks can be cool too. Whatever gets you excited about that brick, there's a reason you chose to go into your area of research. That awe, that excitement is contagious when you're sharing it with any audience. And it's important to connect the dot. I'm so glad you said brick to building. People need to understand what goes into it. You can't appreciate, fine art or a complex recipe without really understanding all the care and love that went in to build the thing. And most people don't even have a clear idea of what a scientific study even means if you look at health literacy. And so those bricks, which might seem mundane to you, are actually a fascinating window into a world that the public has never had. And so you have that beautiful opportunity to let them in and always be accurate, always connect the dot. You can always link people to additional research to do a deep dive in the comments. But that doesn't mean you can't share the brick. Give people that door to walk through, to have the conversation, to ask more questions so that you have the opportunity to go into the nuance. But if nobody knows, there's never the opportunity to educate, engage, inform, and inspire.
So you would link it to the potential of what it could be, but then really focus on the brick itself.
Exactly. Why is the brick so cool? And you can say, one of the things you mentioned was the New Normal campaign and Save the Humans campaign. And we had a very special relationship, a shout out to our institutional review board and IRB leaders at the University of Chicago, because we needed to learn how to balance the sharing of the cool thing and not over promising. And there are very specific word choices you can make, like saying, one day we hope to insert X, or tell people how far off in the future it might be. Educate them, because people don't really know how science works. But when you can share that with them, you're not saying this basic science is curing cancer next week. No, that's not accurate. Don't do that. But if you got this really cool piece of the puzzle and it's part of this big picture that's really exciting, tell people it might. One day down the road, we might be one step closer. Share the journey. Every great story has a journey, has a conflict. And those bricks that you're building or you're making in the lab are part of the big story. So you have opportunities there as well.
I'm so glad you said that, because I think it's a perfect segue into the next question. And it's a question really about balance. And what do I mean by balance? Articulating impact comes in different packages. We were talking about the fact that the Wright Center basically works with investigators at all levels across the spectrum, from undergraduates all the way to early and even mid-career faculty. And in their work, they're sometimes presented with opportunities to show their work to different stakeholders, whether it's the community, a community event, or it may be a grant study section, or a manuscript, or a scientific presentation, local or national. Different audiences. And it can be very challenging for investigators, particularly early in their career, to balance the precision and accuracy with accessibility. We know that a social media post doesn't necessarily translate to getting a grant. And we know that a high impact manuscript doesn't necessarily translate to community uptake. So when you're giving that advice to investigators, how do you help them find the quote middle ground and striking that balance when they're presenting their work?
I love that question. And the beauty in it is that it depends on that audience and their goal. So for example, if they're going into a community meeting with the goal of partnering with community, the way they frame what they're doing and what their audience cares about is very different than if you're going into perhaps a startup pitch meeting to, commercialize your work, where investors care about return on what money they are giving you. Very different groups, or philanthropy, or grant reviewers, all of that. So your word choice will be different. The helping the audience see themselves as the hero in their own story will be different. That community group isn't giving a multi-million-dollar investment. They might not care about the dollars and the cents, but they care about their family and their friends and their loved ones. And so the messaging should lean into why that person cares. And with that, when you take it, one step further, it allows for there to be win-wins and really genuine partnerships and dialogue. The cool part, the thread that crosses all of them, is the magic of story and tapping into high emotion. We know, based on behavioral science, if you are super happy and joy and awe, that is going to inspire people to act. And why are you wasting your time talking to anybody if you don't want them to act or help collaborate or move your work forward or build partnerships? Same, if it's super frustrating, lean into the problem, but baseline doesn't go anywhere. And stories based on fMRI imaging, we know it helps transmit information and the brains of listeners and storytellers align. And who has been in a talk or a meeting where they were bored out of their mind? Nobody likes to be bored. Whether they are busy, acclaimed researchers and scientists, or whether they are community members and research participants who care about a cause, no one likes to be bored. So you can tap into enthusiasm, emotion, story, analogies tailored to the audience that will transcend all and frame it based on the audience.
So thinking about that framing and the storytelling and all of that is so important. You don't have to convince me it's important, but the how you get it done is that's a lot harder, right? Like that's not what we're trained to do as scientists, and as much as we might want to do it, it's really challenging. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time kind of pushing to get some very specifics, like what do I do? What do I do after this meeting? What do our scholars do when they listen to this podcast? Like how do we move this forward? So one of the things I've heard you mention before is the finding a personal brand. And so beyond picking like a couple of words that you feel like you identify with, what is something tangible that a researcher should do today to start to make progress on that personal brand?
And start by answering one question. What is your why? Why did you go into this area of science, research, medicine? That why and the emotion behind that will frame your personal brand as well as your messaging and will help build trust with any audience and buy-in from folks. It's also really healing for people and can help address burnout. I recently gave an in-person keynote and we worked through the why. And there were several people who were like, I started crying after doing this exercise. No one had asked me this before, but these are all the things of my personal life story that led me here to do the research. And it can be healing and exciting, and people care about you. People care about people at the end of the day. So whatever audience you're trying to connect with, when you share a bit about you and your why, you help that care grow and folks will want to help you succeed. It is a very low stress, very personal answer. And once you answer it, things that you share, things that you put on LinkedIn, again, you don't have to build a whole website. You can if you want to. There are free AI platforms. You don't have to have any coding experience. But when you share that, you become visible and you become a human others want to champion.
So that really matches well with some of the things Pat's talked about in some of our previous episodes about having a mission statement. And I've heard him tell our scholars that frequently, and it is excellent advice. I'm curious about what that looks like. So if we took LinkedIn, for example, like, is that what you're putting in the information about you? And then when I'm talking about a brick in one of the posts, how is that? In every post, I'm not going to say, here's my why. And today I built this brick, right? So what does that actually look like for somebody?
Yeah, you can have a balance. And to your point about posts, a great mindset shift for everybody. Just because you post it once doesn't mean everybody has seen it. The algorithm doesn't work that way. You could post your why 7 different times in 1 month, and I promise you, different people will see it and interact with it each time. So don't stress about that. Repetition, people need to be reminded often of what things are. But yes, put your why in your bio. There were I loved some of the VCU scholars we worked with on our virtual session who had beautiful stories. One of them was looking for a potential biomarker to delineate whether a teen who had thoughts about suicide would actually act on it. And part of the beautiful thing of her story, she has a family, but she's also opened up her home to foster teenagers struggling with mental health issues. Like, she is living this. And putting that in your bio means something to people when they're trying to choose the kind of person that they want to work with. So when you're talking about your bricks, you can weave in your why behind your brick in different ways too. You can say, like, this brick reminds me about why I went into this X, Y, and Z, or whatever. But you don't have to mention it every single time. When people see the post, they're going to go to your profile perhaps and then read your about. You're creating that curiosity gap. So when you have the brick, put it into context for why it matters to you. You can weave a mini story into it. What hurdle did you have to go through? And then maybe you had to remind yourself, hey, I told myself this is why I'm really doing it. So when, X, Y, and Z in the lab had this crisis, that helped me move this forward. Everyone loves a mini story, the hero in the story, and you don't have to overthink it. The beautiful thing too is once you can pull that thread, you can use tools like Hemingway app to get it to a lower reading level, or Chat GPT. Do not roboticize yourself, but if you're trying to get something to a more approachable reading level, you can use that as a guide and then put in your own voice and your own words. Sometimes just staring at the blank page can be the hardest part, but we're in an era now with a click of a button in a few seconds, you can get a draft and then make it your own.
So you already answered one of my questions, but I'm going to have one other follow-up one before I pass it back to Pat. So one of the things you've talked about in some of the videos I've seen that you've done and in other presentations I've seen you give is the document, don't create. And you've sort of mentioned elements of that through here. So I'm curious if you can give some strategies about that. And then also one of the things that you said was about like reposting things. And I never do that because I feel like I'm annoying everybody and nobody wants to see it more than once. So I guess if you could also give a little guidance around what is a reasonable amount to post as you're documenting these things that you've done.
Great question. And perhaps we'll use a little example. Say you've got a publication that comes out. You can take that one publication and turn it into multiple posts. So one might be the post of this was awesome to have come out. Give your colleagues a shout out, tag them. Say something nice about your teammates. Everyone loves a compliment. That's an easy like, share, and your university will share that too. 2, bring people behind the scenes. Maybe when we talk about document, don't create, you're sitting at your computer, you take your phone out, you take a little picture of yourself at your computer, and you give 3 tips for what you did to break through writer's block when you were writing that paper. That gives something of value. Then you can also relink to the paper so that maybe someone who didn't see this one gets your helpful tips here and can access it there. Then also maybe bring somebody behind the scenes. Where was a moment something went wrong when you were doing the research? How did you overcome it? And then you can link people to the paper here. And, hey, we almost didn't think this publication was going to happen. Here's a problem we had and how we solved it, so that you're giving people something of value. And that also builds your personal professional brand because people see you're a problem solver. You can communicate. You can stay calm under pressure and get the job done. And isn't that who everybody wants to have on their team at the end of the day? So there are so many different legs. And then you can also, when as maybe you were doing the research on the paper, again, take a photo or just a video clip. Most people have never been in your shoes. So you might think that processing certain data or biospecimens is the most boring thing you've ever experienced in your life. And for a lot of people, it's the super cool thing that they never thought they'd ever be able to see because they don't have access to your top university and your lab and what you're doing. And so with that 5-second clip, you don't have to do any video production. You could even just caption it saying like, these are the things we did to get this great paper published, or we spent 500 hours right here processing this. Those little tiny bricks, as you mentioned, little nuggets of information, they paint the big picture and bring people into your world. And then it's not annoying. You're not saying, I'm so thrilled about this research publication and publishing the same text and the same link that then gets people's eyes to glaze over. It's the different angles. It's can you slice and dice it into different facets that people can appreciate.
So this is the time where we bring it home, right? The practical, the real practical things for our scholars. We want to leave this conversation, Sara, with some very practical tools because I think many of our investigators, particularly the early career ones, are going to say, okay, so what can I change right now? So with that in mind, can you give us an idea of 1 or 2 things, if you are counseling our scholars, that they should do more of right now? And importantly, 1 or 2 things that maybe they want to do less of at this point. And how does consistently practicing these small little human connections, these habits, eventually lead to large-scale impact for them?
These little consistent actions make them visible in a world that is now digital. And people cannot collaborate, have funding opportunities to share with you, partner if they don't know you exist in what you're doing. So the compounding here, once people start to be consistent and visible, they will start to notice people in their physical world noting things they are posting online. I didn't know you were working on this. I know so-and-so who is too. Maybe we connect you. Maybe someone saw a funding opportunity they think of you for. So those moments will start to build. And instead of you having to desperately claw and reach out for collaborators and partners and patients and funding, some of those opportunities will start to come into your inbox and then make your life infinitely easier. Even for getting coverage in the media, reporters want to see that you know what you're talking about and what you're doing. They'll reach out to you and ask you for the interview and feature you. So there are so many inbound things that folks will start to see once those actions compound. And to get started, if someone has zero clue, this is where AI can help with a mental block. You literally can go and type in to ChatGPT, I am studying X, Y, and Z. Please give me 5 ideas for content that would take less than 10 seconds to do every day. It'll give you some ideas. You might hate 5 of them. That's fine, but maybe it gave you one and it only took 30 seconds for you to get that idea. In general, flexing the muscle of documenting instead of creating is good. I would challenge everybody. Something you want to start doing this week, take pictures of what you're doing. It can be as simple as, again, recently when I was speaking at a conference, telling people to document, not create, it was so fun because people started taking pictures of themselves outside their poster sessions and then posting and tagging. They were already there. It was the selfie, I'm here presenting. And you know what? If they didn't do that, that would have just been a little line item on their CV that nobody knew about. But it added to their credibility by sharing how active they were out there. So ChatGPT, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, get some ideas, get used to documenting. You don't have to post every photo you take, but just start to get your mindset in that practice of documenting something every day. And then post 1 to 2 times a week on LinkedIn. Start to see people interact. You don't need to be an influencer with 250 million followers to be successful. That is not the goal. Visibility and connection is the goal.
How about one thing to do less of?
Oh, I love that. One thing to do less of, spend less times on your slides. Very controversial.
Interesting.
Yeah. So often people will pour hours and hours into cramming 6 different data sets on a slide for a presentation instead of focusing on their delivery and the content. And we know science shows more than 90% of communication is nonverbal. And if people are stuck reading your slides and distracted, they're not listening to you. They can read your paper offline. They can read your slides after they're circulated after the fact. Why are you there? The most rare, precious resource anyone has is time, which is why I love that you asked that question. So if you can cut the time you're spending on slides in half and use a fraction of that to document and post once a week, you will start to see huge rewards. So you don't have to find new time. Just repurpose what you would have wasted over indexing on something that's not going to have a big return on investment for you and put that towards this, which will.
That's fantastic. I know I speak for the entire Wright Center and our scholars who aren't here, but they know that we're doing this when I say thank you so very, very much for joining us. This means a great deal. These are the types of skills and tools, as Dr. Neigh was saying, we don't necessarily get taught these types of skills when we go through our graduate programs, but it's increasingly important. It's an interconnected world we're living in, and visibility is very, very important to the work that we do. So I cannot thank you enough for joining us. This has just been really great.
Thank you for having me, and congrats on being at the edge of innovation and bringing this type of education in this format to your scholars. I cannot wait to hear the stories about how they start to use it and see that impact. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to take a selfie with us before we go. Right?
Let's all do it right now. Let's live. This is our live document. Don't create. We're already here. I got one too. Coming in. I'm going to make this full screen. Yay. This is how easy it is, everybody. Woohoo! I'm gonna do selfie mode. Yay! Awesome. See, proof in the pudding. I'll see all of you on LinkedIn as we post and tag. Literally, if anybody has any questions, you can feel free to follow up. Part of my why, I love seeing the domino effect of people using these skills to help change lives. My uncle died of leukemia 6 months before a new treatment came out. His doctor didn't know about a clinical trial. Nobody in my family did. And my dad was a physician. It was gut-wrenching. So communication can save lives. Everyone needs access. And anything I can do to help people do that, count me in.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate it. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time on another episode of Inside the Scholar's Journey. Be well, everyone. Bye.